Okay, so for all of you that have been following along, that was loud. For all of you that have been following along, you know that the Monkey 2019 Honda Monkey ABS behind me, one of the first monkeys in Florida, the monkey that started my YouTube channel, the monkey that, if you're watching this, you all know by now. It started cutting out on me. I don't remember when. It was a while ago. So I'll link to that video. I'll put a little card up here for the cutting out problem video. And this is when I finally got tired of it and said, okay, I got to fix this. I don't know what it is, but I got to fix it. So this is a long fairy tale of a story that I don't even know if it has a happy ending yet, but I'm going to call it an improvement. If not, I don't know if it'd be an all-in bet on fixing it, but I'm going to say that it's fixed, and here's my story. So around the time when I had the man-in-the-box intake and the Pizzazz system and the Yoshimura pipe and the 14-tooth sprocket on the bike is when this problem started happening. It's a really weird problem. So we all know that the kickstands have a sensor on these bikes, right? So all modern bikes have a kickstand sensor. So basically, they don't want you to be able to ride a motorcycle with the kickstand down. So if you're in first gear and you put the kickstand down, it'll stall out. So this is a problem that a lot of people find out. They don't know they have this feature on the bike, and they actually think something's wrong with the bike, but it's not. So that's what the bike was doing. I'd be riding, and it would basically just go bleh and kind of die, and I'd have no throttle response. I can hear the throttle opening, but it was like it was cutting fuel or cutting spark. So on an ECU bike, that's a little tricky. So before we get down a rabbit hole of the cutting out problem and what I did to try to fix it, let me tell you what I've done to the bike as a whole. Because a lot of people out there, first thing they said is get rid of the mods, go back to stock. And if that was an easy and fun thing, I probably would have done it first. But I like my mods. I like modding the bike. That's part of the fun for me. So I didn't desire a stock bike. I wanted the bike that I built. So I wanted to see if I could figure this problem out before rolling back all the mods. So the mods on the bike are really actually pretty conservative. I have the Yoshimura full race pipe, no catalytic converter. I have the man-in-the-box intake, TB parts camshaft, 14-tooth sprocket in the front, 36-tooth sprocket in the rear. And suspension doesn't count. So performance-wise, that's all I have. That's not a lot to ask out of this bike. It's pretty conservative. No big bores, no race heads, no big valves, no nothing like that. So those mods really shouldn't do anything as far as this cutting out problem. Now, the last piece of this puzzle to tie all those mods in together was to either have a fuel controller of some sort to get more fuel. Obviously, if you have a freer flowing exhaust and an intake, you're going to need more fuel to feed those that demand. So basically, you're exhausting and intaking more air, so you need more fuel, obviously. So what we had was the Pizzazz ZFI or a reflashed ECU. I went with the Pizzazz system first because it was just kind of easy for me to wrap my head around, and I was thinking about maybe getting into the tuning and understanding tuning a little bit. So after having the Pizzazz on for a while, I realized I probably wouldn't even find the time to get into that too much. So I kind of started to lose interest in that. The system worked really good, but it just, was something that I foresaw myself doing, but actually then realized I probably would not do. So I ended up buying an additional stock ECU and sending it down to DHM to have them reflash it to support my cam intake and exhaust. So as I remember it, when the Pizzazz was on the bike, it started cutting out. It started this problem way back when I had the Pizzazz on the bike to begin with. So to me, that was okay. The ECU, maybe something's funky there. So I bought the additional ECU, got rid of the Pizzazz, got the ECU reflashed, and put the reflashed ECU in the bike. And all was well, all was good. Super easy, everything worked fine, good to go. Until the cutting out problem came back. So now I have these mods that are not really suspect or something that would cause or trigger this problem. So where do we go from here? What's causing this cutting out? And the problem was it wasn't really consistent. It was doing it sometimes, but not all the time. So I lived with it for a long time. I took the bike to my races. I took it to trail ride around my house. Took it to fool around down at Lars's Supermoto track, and we had fun with it. But I wasn't riding too much, so it wasn't really a big concern of mine until recently. So fast forward until summer, or just a couple weeks ago, I wanted to start preparing the bike for our annual family vacation that we take in upstate New York. I want to bring the monkey up there because this is dual sport and trail ride heaven. I took the Grom there last year, and I had the mobbers on it, newly installed mobbers, and I left the monkey at home because I just felt like it was too new, and I didn't really want to get into the rocks and trails and stuff. And the Grom is like my abuse mule. It's a whipping boy of my stable. I thrashed a Grom, and I have no mercy on it. So bringing it to the mountains of New York, where rocks and mud and inclines and dusty roads and everything are all part of the agenda, I said, okay, I don't know if I'm ready to bring the monkey up there to do that, so I'll bring the Grom. So we brought the Grom. I had a blast, a lot of fun. The Grom worked really good, and this year I want to bring both bikes up there. So this cutting out problem needed to get figured out before this trip, obviously. So we started digging into the cutting out problem. And I say we because a lot of people had some input on this. My dad was down here. My friend Lars is down here. I even talked to my wife about it and telling them what's going on. Not that anybody really knew much how to help me, but everybody had interest in it, including you all. The first cutting out video had tons of comments. I crossed over to Facebook, to the monkey groups on there, and explained the problem, trying to seek some help. And there was tons of comments, tons of interest in this problem. So funny enough that everybody wants to know about problems with the bike, and they want to know how to fix it or how to help fix it. So that's really cool. I love how the community came together and really kind of supported me in trying to get this bike fixed. So I definitely appreciate that, and thank you for that. So now came the time to dig into the troubleshooting and get really serious about this. So the way my theories go, I've raced cars for a long time, and my original 1991 Mazda Miata race car, I knew from my research and troubleshooting that at times the ECU has an open loop and a closed loop mode. And what that means is open loop mode is basically when you're wide open throttle, that ECU has pre-programmed fuel maps to tell the injector, okay, it's wide open throttle, this is how much fuel you give it. And it's basically, if you're 100% throttle, it's getting all the fuel it can provide. You're pinned, and it's giving it all she's got. So in closed loop mode, things change a little bit. Actually, things change a lot. So in closed loop mode, the ECU will take the feedback of all the sensors in the system. So your oxygen sensor, your engine operating temperature sensor, your airflow sensor, your clutch switch, your kickstand switch, your tip over sensor, basically everything that monitors processes on the bike. So your temperature is a process. It's monitoring the temperature of the oil. Your airflow is a process. It's monitoring the progress of the air coming through the filter. Your oxygen sensor is a process. It's monitoring the exhaust gas and the richness of fuel mixture within it. Your tip over sensor tells the ECU when the bike may have fell over and to stop running. Your kickstand switch tells the ECU, hey, the kickstand's down, don't go, so it shuts the bike off. Your clutch switch tells the bike when you're in neutral, and it runs a neutral fuel map. So there's so much going on in this bike, so much with this system, that I kind of narrowed it down based on one factor. The limiting factors in narrowing down for me were the bike did not cut out when it was in open loop mode. So when I was wide open throttle, the bike wouldn't cut out. So that told me that maybe one of the sensors was telling the ECU something was wrong, and it was shutting it down, killing the engine basically. So my deduction was it only does this in closed loop mode, and in wide open throttle you're in open loop mode, and the problem does not exist while I'm running wide open. Also, it took several minutes after starting up the bike for the problem to occur. So I know that the ECU has a warm-up mode, basically a predetermined fuel map run in open loop mode for startup for the first couple of minutes, but it's actually based off of the oil temperature. So when the oil temp gets up to a certain point, the ECU will then switch into closed loop mode. So basically the problem did not exist when in open loop mode. Hopefully this makes sense after going down that huge rabbit hole of open loop and closed loop. But I've learned a heck of a lot about this bike from this problem, so I'm glad to share it with you if you're willing to listen. Okay, so here we are. Closed loop mode's a problem. So I started attacking all of the sensors. The first sensor on the list was the oxygen sensor. Maybe I'm thinking the O2 sensor's bad, that it's run with the Yoshi pipe, it's more exhaust, more intake. Maybe the O2 sensor's bad. That happens a lot. So I swapped it with the Grom's O2 sensor. Remember that test mule whipping boy bike that I have? So that's where this Grom comes into play. Luckily, I have a Grom with basically the same exact engine and ECU setup as the Monkey. So I was able to swap over a lot of parts because the Grom runs perfect, does not have this problem. So basically I know every part on that Grom is working as it should. So my basis was to swap in all of these sensors to try to weed out this problem. So the first thing I did was the O2 sensor. Did not fix the problem. Second thing I did was the engine operating temperature sensor, the EOT sensor. This is the sensor on the cam side, the cam tensioner, cam wheel side of the motor on the bottom. Swap that over to the Grom sensor. Didn't work, still cut out. Next thing I looked at was the tip over sensor. I unplugged it, it threw a check engine light, and it did not fix the problem. So that was kind of put on a shelf as not the problem. Then I went to the clutch and the kickstand sensors. Basically, the clutch and the kickstand circuit is pretty tricky, and the way it communicates with the ECU. So that was a target of mine, basically because along with the tip over sensor, that should be the only sensors that will shut the bike off like it was doing. So if you've had a problem with the O2 sensor, operating temperature sensor, airflow sensor, injector, coil, those are two other things I swapped at the Grom. Those things won't kill the engine like this was doing. So the two things basically were the kickstand switch and the tip over sensor after I ruled out all the other sensors. So what really started zoning me in on the kickstand switch was the fact that when I deployed the kickstand while in gear, it would not shut the bike off. So the bike didn't read the kickstand sensor switch. The ECU wasn't seeing this change. So that was kind of concerning. Okay, so here's a problem. This isn't normal. Why is the kickstand being down, not shutting the bike off like it does on every other bike, including my Grom. So I swapped the kickstand switch from the Grom to the Monkey, and it still didn't shut the bike off. I put the Monkey kickstand switch on the Grom, and it shut the bike off. So I know the kickstand switch was working. I also did this with the clutch switch, because the clutch switch, the clutch lever switch, is in the same circuit as the kickstand switch. So basically, you pull the clutch lever, and the kickstand switch being stowed creates a circuit path to ground, and the ECU sees that and says, okay, everything's good. So I swapped the clutch sensor and lever and everything from the Grom to the Monkey. That still didn't fix the problem. So what I ended up doing, with the help of Cameron Jones from CJR, Cameron Jones Racing, he has been an absolute saint in helping me try to figure this problem out. So I really owe him a lot of thanks for this, and he kind of guided me through what to look for, how things work, and it's actually the source of a lot of this information that I'm telling you right now. So basically, I got info from Cameron to jump the clutch sensor and jump the kickstand sensor. So basically, we're telling the ECU, yep, both of these are closed and making contact. So the bike worked in that fashion. It didn't cut out. So I was like, okay, this is good. That's a step towards the right direction. So what I did was tried each. I unplugged and reconnected the clutch switch, and the bike would cut out. So I jumped that back again and then reconnected the kickstand switch, bike would cut out. Both of these things needed to be jumped for it to work. So when the kickstand switch did not fix it from the Grom, the only thing left I had to check, basically besides checking ground and checking the wiring harness, which I did too, was to swap back to the stock ECU. I did not want to swap back to the stock ECU because my ECU is flashed for the exhaust and for the intake and the cam. So basically going back to the stock ECU is going to run a leaner fuel map. I'm not going to get all the fuel that I need. So that was not something I wanted to do. And I checked with DHM on possible problems if they disabled the kickstand function on the ECU, and he basically said he just didn't do anything beyond the reflash for the mods. So this is the last ditch effort I had. So today I swapped the original ECU into the bike, and it worked beautifully. It did not cut out. So problem solved. Oh, or is it? So I rode for about a half an hour. I rode hard, I rode easy. Bike came up to temp, definitely. I rode long enough to try to replicate the problem like I have been in the last 2 weeks, and it's not replicated yet. So I'm thinking on this, not like a royal flush, but maybe like a full house, that I have this problem figured out. But now the only problem is that the stock ECU is not tuned for my mods. So I'm going to take and heed the advice of a very influential character out there named Larry Enticer. When it's phrased as, don't be silly, of course I'm going to send it. Well, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to send it. I'm going to run the stock ECU and pick the easiest thing to take off the bike mod-wise to try to richen the fuel back up a little bit. So unfortunately, what it's come down to, the easiest thing to take off was my Yoshimura exhaust system. So I love you, Yoshimura. I love this exhaust, but going back to the stock exhaust is going to choke down the flow a little bit and richen up my fuel mixture to probably get by for this trip to the mountains that I have planned until I can get the ECU checked out and possibly reflashed again. So I put the stock pipe back on the bike. I kept the man-in-the-box air filter, or M-take, because I have this prototype oil cooler, which I think is actually an oil cooler from the Grom. It's the Marin oil cooler and TB parts, send it to me to try out. And it just did not fit on the bike correctly. I have a video that I shot and produced for it, but I don't think it shows this oil cooler in good light, so I'm not going to probably produce and edit out that video because I just don't think it's the right oil cooler for the bike, and I don't want to encourage people to go that route. I'll probably do another video on that separately because that's a different subject. But anyways, the oil cooler's on the bike. I destroyed the stock head stud while taking it out to get the oil cooler channeled grooved head stud back in there. So I have to leave the oil cooler in there until I get a new head stud. And then when I get a new head stud, then I'd have the room to put the air box back in. But I don't want to do that because I hate that air box. So this to me was the only solution I really had. I also could take the cam back out and put the stock cam back in, but I don't want to do that. I want to try it with the cam, and I'm just going to monitor the heat on the spark plug, and I'm going to see how hot it is, how lean it is, and just kind of watch it. So really I'm risking a piston meltdown on this, and having replaced the piston and rings on the Grom before, that's about a $75 investment. So I'm not super worried about that if I have to replace the piston and rings from running a little bit lean for about a week or so. So that's a really, really long story to figure out one fix for the bike. Now, it could be argued that I should have tried the ECU first. However, with it being reflashed, I trusted that flash, and I talked to David from DHM. I talked to Cameron Jones, and nobody really said ECU. It was not. It was such a weird problem. I mean, it was weird enough that on the 3 monkey groups that I posted the problem on, I got a lot of feedback and a lot of people pointing me in the directions that I was kind of going, and a couple of y'all focused in on the kickstand switch, which ended up being the correct problem. However, it was how the ECU was working with the switch. So the problem was the kickstand switch, but it was not a bad switch. It was the signal that the ECU was taking and doing something weird with it, and shutting the bike down. So basically, out of 3 monkey groups on Facebook and 2 Grom groups with 22,000 and 33,000 people in them, nobody has had this problem before. So finding information online on the Grom forums, I found nobody that's had this problem at all. So basically, it was, do I return the bike back to stock, take it back to the dealer, which my warranty is ran out, so I'm not going to pay the dealer to do all the stuff that I did. I might as well just buy a new bike, or just keep hacking away at this and figure it out. So basically, that's all I did. I hacked away at it for the last 2 weeks, just trying different things, swapping parts at the Grom, and haven't, really loosened focus on it. So that's kind of dictated what content I've been creating too, because I have a lot of archived content from Renan and his Pee-wee stuff and things we're doing around the house, lifestyle videos and stuff. But the monkey videos have all but stopped because I needed to figure this problem out. I don't want to keep doing stuff to the bike when there's a nagging problem like this. So now that I got the problem figured out, I'm hoping that I can get back to some more monkey content. I have a couple of parts waiting to be installed that companies have sent me samples of, and I want to check out. Some of them seem pretty cool, so that's something to be excited about. And other than that, we're going to go on this huge mountain vacation, dual sport riding heaven, and I'm going to use the monkey, and I'm going to thrash test it. I want to see how this monkey handles the mountains, and I want to show you guys that process. I was really inspired by the Motor Trend guys riding the monkeys through Baja on that video, and it kind of inspired me to do a little bit more, maybe a little bit more extreme stuff with my monkey. And the move back to the stock pipe kind of supported that notion because it's quiet. I mean, super, super quiet. So we're going to be riding through game lands and forests and around cabin communities and campsites and stuff, and you know, I don't want to be louder than I need to be anyways. So going back to the stock pipe, it wasn't too heartbreaking for me, even though I love the Yoshi pipe. Down here in Florida, it's fun to cruise around the neighborhoods and you know, give people a little brap session as I'm passing by. But the quiet muffler is probably going to suit the mountain riding a little bit better. Plus, if I lay the bike over, which I very well might be doing in mud and wet environments, instead of falling on a $600 Yoshi pipe, I'll fall on the stock heat shield, which to me is going to be a better place to fall. So that's what's happening. And there's one more thing I forgot to say. I went back to the stock gearing on the bike too, because I was thinking maybe the ABS was a problem. So maybe the ABS was seeing a huge disparity between the wheel speed and the crank speed and shutting the bike off, which is extremely dangerous. I don't know why the ECU would ever do that, but looking at the wiring diagrams, the ABS system does not really communicate with the ECU. So I kind of ruled that out pretty early. And also I took the ABS fuse out to disable that system. But the stock gearing was like, okay, that's another mod I can roll back kind of easily. So I put the 15 tooth and 34 tooth sprockets back in there, and I have to tell you, they are absolutely horrendous. So I don't want to even go make a ride video about it because I've already went back to the stock pipe. But anyways, I rode and I did a top speed test with the Yoshi pipe, the cam, TB Parts cam, the M-Take, and the ECU flashed and tuned for those mods while at wide open throttle, because it wouldn't cut out at wide open throttle. With the stock gearing, I had trouble getting the bike past 55, 60 miles an hour. So if you want your bike to pop, if you want it to go a little bit faster, do yourself a favor and change those gears out. 1436 is a great combo. I have a 1437 combo in the Grom. I like it even better, so I'll probably jump up to that with the Monkey. And I actually want to try the 1438 combo or maybe the 1538 combo in the future too. So just a word of advice. A lot of people argue about gearing. Honda did it the right way, blah, blah, blah. BS. The stock gearing lugs so bad that fourth gear is practically useless unless you're wanting to just cruise at 50 miles an hour on the highway, which is just dangerous. I mean, I don't know why you do that. So that's it. The gearing's going to go back. Going to go to 1436 for the trip up north. Got to be able to climb those hills, climb the mountains and the trails, and that's basically it. One more exciting thing: if you've watched this video this long, this is a little tidbit of interesting info, but I have a lot of connections in the racing industry, and was able to get connected with a spring manufacturer, and I actually sent, this all started from Pee-wee's because I needed to fix Renan's Pee-wee because the springs on it and the suspension's terrible. So anyways, we got that sorted out very easily, but I sent the stock shock from the Monkey to this company, and they analyzed it and determined that the rear spring rates for the Monkey are somewhere around 70 inch-pounds or so for each spring. So if you do the math on that, you basically, this bike is sprung for 140 something pound rider, because 70 something plus 70 something, let's say 75 plus 75, two springs together, that's 150 inch-pounds. So a 200 pound person like me is going to kill those springs. So what I'm thinking I want to do is, if it's easy enough to change out the springs on these shocks, I'm going to start having heavier spring rate springs manufactured that are for heavier riders, and we'll do a couple of weight ranges, and we'll be able to customize the stock shocks by just adding springs. So if you like the way the stock shocks look, the dampening on them is okay, but it's just the spring rate so soft. So basically a replacement spring for the OEM shock that's geared for certain weight ranges. Does that sound good to everybody? Is that something you'd be interested in? If so, let me know in the comments, and that's definitely something that I might adventure in. So Let me know what you think about that. So this has been long. It's late. It's raining. It's thundering. That's probably interrupted a lot of my video. So I'm going to sign off. I'm going to get this edited out because I think this info is pretty pertinent to my quest to fixing this bike lately. And once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for your help, especially Cameron Jones at CJR, Rodney Sargent for getting me set up with Cameron. He called in air support on that one for me. So basically, thanks for watching, and thanks for all the help that everybody provided, all the suggestions, all the brainstorming y'all have done with me. And we're going to take this bike up to the mountains of upstate New York and Pennsylvania, and we're going to tear some stuff up. So hang in there with me. Thanks for supporting me, and thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. See you later.